We made this.
Hello and welcome to the last episode of this season of No Book Club, a Yellow Jackets podcast only on the We Made This Podcast Network, the podcast that kills moons. I am your host, Matt Latham, and with me for the third week in a row is Kurt North. How you doing, Kurt?
Hello. It's almost as if I'm a co-host on this podcast. Isn't that strange?
I know, yeah. It's kind of weird. It's like almost regular.
It's almost like a regular go. Yes, this is the final episode of season 2. God knows when we're going to get a season 3, but we might be well into 2026 at this rate with the writer's strike. But yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right this week. This week I've been raring to go. Like I said last week, I've been on a week off. I'm not at work today like I was last week, although I am in my little room that I normally record in, and it's boiling hot. So I've decided that screw it. I don't care about the sound quality. I'm just going to have my window open. So that is what I'm doing. I've got shorts on, if anyone needs to know that. And I'm wearing a T-shirt from a TV show, which people do not want to hear about.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm just about to start a week off. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. This is, I think, the second episode I've tried a new microphone. Got a new microphone. And already we had like technical issues trying to figure out again before it was beginning. So, but
yeah, well, once you get it sorted and everything's fun-dabby-dozy and it's amazing, you'll be able to eat your heart out.
Yes, we'll do. Yes,
it will go down like the phoenix from the flames.
That's Kurt injecting a bit of humour there. So,
well, I try. I'm not very good at it, but you know.
It's yeah. So. So this is the last regular No Book Club podcast for a while. No plans on any specials yet or anything, so this might be the last time you hear us for a while, but keep following us on the podcast things because we'll be, even though this is a very weird place to say this already, isn't it? We have not, there's something like almost finale about that's what I'm talking about, which coincidentally is what we're talking about today, which is storytelling. It
finale. Is, yeah. Just on before we do start, this is like we're recording at the very end of May, being that the episode aired today, 26th of May, and I think a while back, right back in January, when I looked at my podcasting schedule, that it has been absolutely rammed full of stuff, and I've missed one episode here, and actually ended up doing a couple more. So it's balanced itself out, but this is pretty much the end of my podcasting run. It's almost been 5 months of podcasting full on. So I'll be taking a little break. I've got little bits here and there, but it takes a lot out of you. It does. It's to be on so many shows and to try and watch so many TV shows and actually discuss stuff. So it does feel a bit finale for me as well, just separately.
Yeah.
I'm going to have, I may have to jump on a couple of podcasts here and there, but this definitely feels like an end of season for me, really. So it's been an end of my 5-month podcast season.
The word finale, quite apt. The finale of your kind of bulk of podcasting, and the finale for quite a few things thematically and storytelling-wise in the first 2 seasons of Yellow Jackets. We can probably discuss whether the episode does a good job at that. We'll
see.
We'll see. But yeah, so I mean, your overall thoughts to begin with.
So I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I actually, if I'm being honest, I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't know how to pass it, really. I mean, there's oftentimes I think I've mentioned on other podcasts and maybe on this one where you walk away from something and go, do you know what? I'm not sure how I felt about that. And I've watched this twice now, and I just find it a little bit middling. Like, just didn't really. It's got some interesting stuff in there, and it's got some things that we can talk about. But as a finale, it kind of wraps things up. Conclusions. It's got some really fast-paced kind of like, okay, that story seems to be wrapped up really quickly. Is there going to be any ramifications from that next season? It felt a little bit, in some ways, rushed, I think, is one of the things that I thought. And I think I'm hoping that this is kind of some sort of time for me to actually go through the episode and come out having more of an opinion, because it's not often I don't have an opinion on something. And I'm struggling with this one, if I must admit. Even on the second watch, I was struggling. I was still looking at it going, I'm not sure here.
I find it, I think, in isolation, there are moments and kind of incidents in this which I think, there's some really good stuff here. But I don't know, as a whole, there's something iffy. I'm not iffy. I don't know, something's not clicking completely. Yeah, I think with you, I mean, we're recording this like I watched it for the first time about 4.5 hours ago. So it's probably the first time we're actually recording on the Friday. So you are getting kind of like knee-jerk reactions, more or less. But we have both watched it twice. And I think even after the second run through, I can appreciate what it tries to do. I think it's A- for effort, B-, C+ for execution, if we're going to go for the old school report type thing. I think there's a couple of things where I think on paper the ideas are sound, but there's a few things. I think how it's all come together is it's not season 1 level.
Oh no, definitely not. I don't think even like last week's, even though I enjoyed last week's, isn't nowhere near Doom coming level. And I don't know, it definitely feels it's going to be interesting doing a rewatch of both seasons together, just to pass that, just to kind of go, right, has it dipped in quality? I think it has. I know that other people have talked about this, and it's not been as strong as season 1. I wouldn't expect that necessarily in a TV show, to be fair. Sometimes you've got to go with the ebbs and flows. If you have a fantastic first season, then brilliant. You expect them to be dips. And overall this season, if we're just talking in the season as a whole for a second, bar a couple of things, I've not really had any issues at all. And I'm not necessarily saying I've got any issues here, but I'm sure we might come up with some. But I just think it's generally just lacking something. It seems a little bit lackluster, I think.
Yeah, and I think perhaps we're probably not going to go through chronologically. Yeah, I think we are going to go through this chronologically, and I think the big point, and I think the biggest point I think that will have, and I think it has an impact on the season as well, is Juliette Lewis, and the death of adult Natalie, adult Natalie, and I think this is because of external factors kicking in against perhaps the original showrunners' ideas of where they want the story to go, and reading. I was reading into before I started the second rewatch. I was trying to catch a few things about stuff behind the scenes and everything, and I'm wondering whether that's had an impact on other things as well on the season as a whole. But the headline.
I remember that Juliette Lewis wasn't quite happy with something way back when. I think before the end of season 1 or beginning of season 2, that she was saying she wasn't thinking about the story.
Yeah. I've actually got someone, I think, from March last year. So 2nd of March 2022. There's a Reddit post where they've posted a screenshot of a Ask Me Anything, or I can't remember, it's the NGL thing where it's anonymous questions and they can post them on Instagram Live. And then they asked, "Love Yellow Jackets, just finished, will you be in season 2? Yes, we probably start filming by July. I hope Natalie gets written in the way that I thought she was going to be written when I signed on. Much more colourful, scheming, smart, not fixated on a guy and talking tough, lol. But I have a Hulu show that's going to be such a fun, exciting, different character, visually and energetically. I will be announcing it soon." So even before started filming season 2, she was like raising kind of concerns and questions about the character stuff. And apparently, there's other bits and pieces in interviews where she said a few comments, which I've not had a chance to look through, but she's probably had a few comments where she's probably not been happy with the character of Natalie's progression and arc, particularly in season 1. So I'm wondering whether they kind of agreed to write her out if she stayed for season 2. And I'm wondering how much that had an impact on their story plans, because I think it definitely had an impact in season 2, more or less, particularly in this finale. And so I've got a feeling that the showrunners were kind of put into a place where they had to kind of write around.
Yeah,
something.
and I think this is an interesting, discussion to have, which is outside the scope of the actual episode. But the kind of like when things like that happen. Now, at the beginning, I think they said they've got 5 seasons worth of television. Now, that's often what TV writers say. We've sketched out. I know in the past there's been TV shows in the 90s, for example, that say they've got an idea of where they're going, and they had no idea. Even in the 2000s, really, there was like, oh, right, okay. There's premises that weren't even thought of at the beginning. But then just having this idea of things and things that happen, and it did come to my mind this afternoon, because I watched the first episode, first thing this morning, and then I watched it again this afternoon once I got back in the house and settled down again, and it did cross my mind that things change and things have to alter, and the Yellowjackets is in a weird position because they've got 2 timelines to deal with. So if Sophie Thatcher had decided that she was going to go, how does that have an effect, and how on what their conversations are going to be, and how does that then infiltrate into the storytelling of the general sketched out 5-season arc that they may have. So someone like Juliette Lewis, who I can imagine really, if you sign her on board, you probably would be lucky to get 2-3 seasons out of her anyway. She's that type of person that would probably just go, I want to move on to the next project, or she's it's interesting in that way as well. So and you Christine Ritchie again, she's a massive star, and how long can you keep hold of someone like that for? And all of that has to kind of feed into the situation. That being said, if we were to start talking about the episode as such, I know I'm not hosting this one, but I think it naturally, you brought it up, is the way they've pulled it together and the way they make the ending. How are you feeling about that? Because I think it's certainly interesting what they've done.
I think in a technical choreographed blocking way, I wasn't really a fan of how it all came down. There's a weird kind of, I don't know, it didn't feel natural in terms of how it kind of.
Did it feel supernatural? You said it didn't feel natural. That's all I'm saying.
See what happened. I think the wind blew Misty across and stuff. But no, yeah, I know there was just something kind of weirdly stilted and kind of iffy about how it was shot, how it was edited together, to the point where, I don't know, it just felt, it didn't feel like it was a natural kind of struggle or something, or I think they wasn't exactly sure how to kind of block it out that Misty would be the one that to accidentally stab her or something. So and that kind of dulled the impact of the incident.
Yeah. I mean the baggage is obviously Lisa coming down and actually using the same shotgun that Nat had, because that was opened by Misty. So Misty has basically opened the doors on that as well. So she's responsible in all ways. But what about the actual thing of like the fact that Javi couldn't be saved by her? Well, or she let Javi die. There was something else as well, which kind of dawned on me, and I'm failing to see it now. But then obviously this is the same thing, the fact that she didn't want Lisa to die in the same situation, that it's literally mirroring what happened with the whole seance and the card pulling and all that type of thing. It's the same thing, and she just didn't want that to happen again. So that's how they've kind of closed it off. And then obviously the apology, not the apology, the thing about the forgiveness, which she speaks to Lisa earlier on. So I can see what they're trying to do and trying to earn that death is it enough? Is the question? And obviously we've got Natalie in the younger scenes, but does that have an effect? And we've never really talked about this in Yellow Jackets. Does that have an effect on what we see moving forward? Because we know what now happens to Natalie in the future, and her general arc is finished. So it's like there is obviously story to tell with Natalie because she now seems to be the Antler Queen, but is that compromised because of the way it does feel a little bit, I don't want to say rushed, but it does feel a little bit disjointed, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I fully agree. Because I think the finale centered around Natalie more or less. Like the first shot is pretty much teen Natalie walking towards Travis, and it is essentially the last phase in what I've pretty much been saying all the season. I think particularly for the 90s arc, in getting the detractors fully on board with the concept of the wilderness being the wilderness. So Ty's been like the first to kind of go because of Van and the fact it's impacting her sleepwalking. I think Sean has been traumatized enough to go into it, even though I think we're still missing stuff. And you even pointed out there was deleted scene. I think after
I saw it literally after we recorded it. I think it was like the following morning, and I looked and went, oh. So there was a deleted scene with Sean and something to do with the card playing game and kind of the understanding of that. Yeah, I think that came out from one of the cast members.
I think it was it was there was an interview in, I think, Vogue, with Sophie Elise, who talks about a scene where she talks to Lottie afterwards, which adds context to why she kind of wanted to save Lottie in the previous episode. So that's that, and I think this is the kind of tipping point of Natalie kind of succumbing to be one of them that she referred to as last week. So the kind of the PTSD moment that kind of trips her into that. But even that, again, lack of a better word, felt slightly rushed, where she kind of seemed to just go with it and was even smiling when people were bowing to her and everything. And I can see how, and I think they tried to justify it with her conversations with Ben. Ben saying that, oh no, she's worse than them because she let Harvey die. So I can kind of see that, but again, it's like the kind of rush to the game. It just feels a bit too abrupt to be like a natural progression.
Yeah, it felt like those. There's a classic episode of the X-Files where there's one character, you might remember this, but there's one character who's in the very first episode, and I think he appears again in about 4 episodes after that in season 1, and in season 5 he gets named as somebody who's like not an imposter, but kind of like, someone who's been behind the scenes pulling all the strings and trying to get rid of them and things like that. And it's like that's come completely out of the blue, and it felt like that. And for me it was like, okay, Natalie, it's like, whoa, apart from the bathroom scene, which is the only thing I can think of where they've had a connection as such, when they both went out and did their little rampage to try and find Davi at that point, I think it was.
Yeah.
So, and then they came down and had that bath scene, which I thought was a really good scene. There's not really anything else that we've seen there that really can double down on that, and there's no doubling down on it at all. So yeah, it does feel a bit weird, and obviously with Natalie, it has more of an edge on Shauna and what she was writing in her journal than it did really for Natalie. And as I say, the smile thing was, beautifully acted, but is it what we needed? Is it kind of, was it even? Yeah, I suppose it is kind of needed because of what happens in modern day, but yeah, it's a strange one overall, and I'm still struggling. I'm still really struggling with this episode. It's gonna take some time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, part of me kind of really wants to rewatch season 2 and then revisit it, and I think it'd be worth kind of perhaps giving some space and coming back to it like before season 3 starts, just to see if we do a reassessment of it. But
a reappraisal.
Reappraisal.
let's do a reappraisal of season 2, because as I say, season 3 might not be for a while.
Yeah.
So so I think we might need a reappraisal maybe 6 months down the line or something.
Yeah, and I think, and I think that's and I think I've said it a couple of times this season where it feels as if things have started, or just kind of skipped ahead a few things, like a few beats too early. Like I was like genuinely surprised they ate Natalie. Everyone ate Natalie. Everyone ate Jackie. At the end of episode 2, I was quite surprised everyone was on board with that straight away. But I think the concepts themselves are sound. They work quite well. It's just the execution, I think, just kind of failed a bit. It's season 8 of Game of Thrones. It's very similar to the season 8 of Game of Thrones, where logically all the beats they do make sense. It's just that everything was just condensed very, very quickly.
Season 8 of Game of Thrones has got dragons in, so I don't watch it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of Game of Thrones. It's just not my bag at all. But I'd have to pass on to your judgment for that one. So
yeah, I think I think general consensus is season 8's not as good, and my argument's always been that the content of it and what happens is logically sound. What happens in the last episode is logically sound. It's just that I think the creators were told they could do a Star Wars and then wanted to finish Game of Thrones too quickly because they wanted to do Star Wars. But I think the same thing is happening with, I think, Yellow Jackets in places. Not that the creators are going off to want to rush it to finish Star Wars. I think they just got these ideas, but the connective tissue to naturally delve into those things, into those kind of plot beats, seem accelerated in places.
Do you know, I was just thinking as well, just as a mindset thing. You know, we were saying we're expecting 10 episodes and we got 9.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, and I know it was far out, but you've got to think this is a build-up, whether or not the writer's strike had something to do with it, whether or not they kind of wanted to speed up the process to make sure that they hit the targets, maybe. Because you don't know what you don't know when those things are going to strike, do you? So if you're building up to a strike in the guild, and you know you're still writing while you're filming, and you know you're getting towards the end of the show, and then all of a sudden a strike's called, you can't make any more adjustments. You've got to read the script as it's written and that type of thing. So I'm wondering if there's something maybe, not as an excuse, but maybe that there's in the back of their minds that might have been playing on their minds a little bit, potentially.
Possibly, yeah, but I don't think there's. I think that was probably much because I think this probably finished by the end of last year, so I don't think the writer's strike was that much of an impact. But
I'm just thinking, like, sort of knowing it's on the horizon.
True.
You know, it's like you kind of want to get everything sealed up, don't you? So I don't know. But yeah, that's all speculation, so we don't know.
Yeah,
but,
so
it just feels like there's just, as you say, like the deleted scene, which is fine. You know, that's the nature of television. But it's not on. The thing is, it's not on network, is it? Well, Showtime, I suppose. But you know, it has the ability to play 50-minute episodes. It doesn't have to be a tightly knitted thing. So the fact that deleted scene was in there, you know, did not play right. And then you look at this week's episode and things just seem a little bit hurried or not really there. I don't know. There's definitely something. There's something irking me about it, and I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. But yeah, and again, I think it's one of those. A rewatch, particularly the Natalie scenes, I think will probably see if it plays out more. But I did quite. I mean, one thing. I did quite like around that scene when you flash to kind of Juliette Lewis sat on a plane, on a plane, and not because it reminded me of other TV shows, but because I think it kind of linked back to her kind of vision, life flashing before her eyes, her pre-vision of death that happened in episode 4 of season 1, where she saw her dad, because it comes up with this idea and linking to what we saw with Jackie's death in season 1, with, if not a kind of like, not an afterlife, but perhaps more a case of the subconscious mind preparing itself for death, or like sheltering or protecting itself, or kind of.
It's not evil though. It's not evil.
No,
it's not evil. It's
hunger.
just hungry.
It's
just hungry.
But I still think that. But I think that's about death more than any malevolent force. I think it's just more about the natural way that the mind processes death, and and my theory of the avatars of death, or we're seeing the subjective views of kind of like of like, rather than the hooded cloak and the scythe and the very deep Terry Pratchett style voice from the Discworld books,
or the William Sadler version of death.
Yes, or the William Sadler. That I think kind of the death appears as like other people and stuff, and in this case,
this is a deep cut. Only the good version of death, which is just the cloak and dagger. If anyone gets that on this show, then I will be amazed.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Previous guests, Colin and Sam, are not allowed to say that they know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
But
that's what Juliette Lewis should have done. Not now, matey. Oomph.
The world loves a bastard. I really apologise to anyone who has no idea what we're talking about, but
well, we don't know what we're talking about in this episode, so I think there's a theme running through this episode today.
So I think, but in this case, we've got it appearing in the form of like Hovey and Sophie Thatcher and Courtney Eaton.
No Travis.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I thought was interesting. I think that's quite intriguing.
I think that's quite. Yeah, I did find that very interesting when that happened as well. It might just been actor availability more than anything else.
Yeah,
and probably the visual of Juliette Lewis interacting with the younger cast, I think, kind of is, more or less just.
Well, it needs to be thematically, doesn't it? Because that's where, to be fair, up until the point where she gets nominated as the Queen, she was an outsider, and that was everyone. This is kind of like what I think they were trying to get at, the fact that, she has actually regressed back to that in that she has become respected, renowned, actually looked up to, etc., and the crowning from Lottie to give her that is the reason why she regressed to that point. So I get that thematically, to be fair, but even like sort of, because Travis wasn't there even like as a young Travis, but again, that might confuse matters. So I can see what they were trying to do, because that's kind of going back to where she was at the epitome of where she needed to be, and because everything happens after that, she goes on a massive roller coaster up and down, and she eventually gets to the point where she can accept everything, and actually, the forgiveness thing that she talks about Lisa, but she doesn't want Lisa to be her, and also the fact that she doesn't do what she did with Javi. So there's I can see why they were doing that, because it was the fact that, Lisa is saved because it's actually Nat feels that she should be the one, not Lisa, because it's exactly the same story playing over again with the whole doing the cards and stuff. So I can see why they did that.
True, yeah. But I think, in particularly for the 90s Nat as well, there's the pretty much the idea of things choosing, or like them going and saying, "Oh, we're going to the wilderness. The wilderness has chosen Natalie for this and stuff." And I think it's the point. I think that kind of Natalie's acceptance of that's what it really was. Yeah. I mean, she said, in the first few things that she said to, I think it was either Ben or Travis, I can't remember. I think it might have been Ben, where she goes, "The wilderness chose." It might have been to Travis.
There was a moment where she spoke to Ben, was like, "I can't come with you because I let Javi die."
Yeah, and then she said it was to Travis that she said that the wilderness. Natalie said the wilderness chose.
Yeah,
and that's the first time I mentioned that as well. And I think there's kind of interestingly on the same kind of wavelength, on the same kind of thematic thing as well, is what the scene between Travis and Van, where I think Travis is kind of needed that scene with Van where Van says, "Oh, I believe I kind of need it because I'm here for a reason," which kind of links back to I think the scene that she had last week with Ty, in that she feels that she's alive for a reason.
Yeah.
And she kind of reiterates that kind of mindset to Travis as well.
Yeah, which on the flip side, in this one where she's dying of cancer, that's almost the flip of that. You know, the fact that she's getting more and more thing, but especially with Van in the modern day, where she's persuades Ty not to phone for the crisis crew team to come. You know, she's almost willing it. I think I mentioned that last week, where she was really eager to do it. So I think that there's an element of like almost the reverse for Van.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, where she's kind of flipping back and forth. But then again, though, she was kind of almost half believing adult Lottie at the time. Yeah, but then again, though, I think one of the things that actually, yeah, let's move on to that. Let's move on to what I was going to talk to you about. Yeah, because what you're on about Van, it kind of links in with thematically and conceptually an idea I found I loved, but I don't know whether it was seasons too early or anything. But the card game they played as adults, to me, that felt like it was the last ever episode.
Right, okay.
That had like last ever episode finale energy. I really like I love the idea. Love the idea and the conceptually them having to recreate the hunt again. I think like perfect thing for them to do, because it kind of flips back between the two of them and stuff. But I think since the concept was only brought up the episode before, I do think it was perhaps a bit too early to do that. But I'm again going back to them writing out Natalie. Perhaps they wanted to do that, but they had to do it there because of writing out Juliette Lewis.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. It was. I quite like the montage really with like Sean doing the finger prick and the blood on the card and kind of recreating everything. It kind of it's a bit of a reach, but kind of what I was saying last week with the whole cyclical nature, that it's history repeating itself. That seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of TV shows. A lot of sci-fi shows do recurring motifs like that. But it does feel like, and as I say, with this being like a season 2 kind of conclusion to a few things, that they wanted to like sort of bring that back and recreate those moments so we can have the reflection of both early and late. But I thought that the montage of actually getting them together and actually each of them having their own individual things, they were making the masks and all that type of thing. I think it works. But yeah, I can see what you mean by an actual finale rather than a season finale, because it does conjure up those kind of that kind of vibe.
Yeah, and it brings back. I think it was last week or the week. It was either last week or this week before, where it was on about the slow convergence of the present day, referring to what they did in the 90s. And like it went from kind of bubbling and the odd references to recreating a hunt, which was like, oh, it's a roller coaster, and the roller coaster going deep into the references and stuff. I was like, wow, okay. Because I was like, wow, this escalated quickly. But I mean, I think the scene itself was great, and I think it was interesting about how the different characters kind of reacted to it. I think that if they had more time, or if it was later, I've got a feeling that they would have had at least a whole episode of just that, which would give them all the women more time to kind of delve on their own kind of personal reactions to it. Instead, we've just got Shauna's reaction to it of it's not real, which I think is probably one of the more important lines in the show to date so far, or at least or at least brings up that question.
I think it always comes back to me saying this, and this one's probably I think it's more my own personal bias to Lottie, but I didn't like this Lottie. I was like, oh God, I don't like her falling apart like this.
Mm-hmm.
but she says, does it really matter? So I think that's probably more important, because that is almost meta to say, Shauna's saying one thing, it's not really real, and then you've got other people saying it is real, and then it's like it chooses, etc., etc., and then Lottie going, does it really matter either way? It doesn't, does it? It's all about them in the grand scheme of things. So I thought that was like an interesting development.
True, yeah, and I think interestingly as well, I think Lottie's response to Shauna's statement saying, "Oh, does it matter, or are they any different?" I can't remember what the exact wording was.
She was like, "Does it really matter?"
Yeah. Is there a difference?
Is there a difference?
Is there a difference between like whether it's not or anything? But yeah, but I quite like that kind of like resemblance of the hunt, even though again couldn't fully buy the others just suddenly all donning the masks without some kind of like resistance or anything. But particularly when like the plan was just to get Lottie to not see sense, or at least calm down or anything, or just to allow her to kind of calm down and stuff. But
I think if you look at it from that perspective, though, the actual ritual that they do, and I know that the heart wasn't in it, and I know Javi's heart was in this, but that their general hearts weren't in it as a group mentality. That isn't there. So you can recreate all you want with Doom coming. It was visceral. It was full on. It was kind of like whoa. Whereas last week's was kind of like, we need to do this because it needs something, and we need to decide, and we need to do this to maintain our lives. So there was a necessity to it rather than Doom coming, which was completely like an animalistic. And then you've got this one at the end here, which is like the hearts weren't in it. So, and it wasn't a group mentality, because the group is completely fractured. Even though they're all together, they are completely fractured. So I suppose there is that to look at it, if you can potentially pass it that way, maybe.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I also think that So, what did you take with the convergence with the story, with Callie's story? So it's pretty much the whole gist of this whole plot, and I feel like we're going backwards with it. I think we're reversing through we are reversing through the episode actually.
Okay, if that's fine, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, reversing through particularly the 90s, where like it appears that things are converging, for all the kind of plot lines converging onto the cult compound, and I think one of the key aspects is the Shauna Callie relationship, and like brings in with Callie with a gun. Who's shooting Lottie and getting kind of caught up and stuff. So,
I did think when I was watching it the second time, I did think that actually from a writing perspective that gun was brought in like 4 or 5 episodes ago, and it's there. It's a Chekhov's gun. So the fact that they've actually utilized it, and the fact they referenced it again. There was something else that was brought up as well, which kind of like, oh, that's quite interesting. They've brought that back. That might jump back. Well, even like the shotgun itself, the shotgun was fine. The fact that was the end of the season, last season, and the fact that the writing for the fact that Jeff is opening up to Callie, and Callie's going through stuff, and they have an open relationship in the discussions that they're having, because you wouldn't have got to the process of the gun had you not had those conversations. So I thought that actually worked quite well, to be fair. I thought as you say, the convergence of the storyline, that you've got Callie and Jeff working together as a team and as a family unit. And I think even Jeff mentioned something about the American family unit, which is kind of like this broken idealistic of like the 50s suburban, area, which is what, Shauna was portrayed as, wasn't she, at the beginning? It was very much like that, mother, father, daughter, perfect suburban area, got a little bit of money, not loads of money, but got a little bit of money, perfect. But then the breakdown of the family unit and all that type of thing. So I thought that it was interesting they brought that up, and that Jeff is trying to rekindle that, and that Callie, I don't think Callie's story is completely over, but she feels like that's like the apple falling from the tree last week or the week before. That whole conversation is like, there's a genuine kind of emotional resonance there, especially given that she knows now about the baby. So I actually think that was probably one of the better elements of this episode, to be fair.
No, I agree, actually. And I think particularly as this is the season where I think Callie starts to understand more about what her mom went through, what exactly she's doing, what exactly she went through, and just kind of like understanding her mom more, and then being put into a situation like where she just suddenly saw a bunch of people in mass trying to chase her with a knife.
Yeah.
And particularly the very brief interaction with Lottie. I think Lottie calling Callie strong, particularly with the whole issue and the issues that Lottie and Shauna had over Wilderness Baby.
Yeah.
That was a nice kind of like little moment to pull that. But then again, though, I think as that was happening, part of me was like going, well, as the ceremony was going on, I was like, yeah, Callie's gonna end up shooting someone.
Yeah. The Lottie baby thing, it took me a while just to like sort of dawn on the fact that she was quite protective over the the stillborn child, and that's a reflection of that. It's like, oh, right, this is your daughter, So there's an element of like the connection between the two, and the fact that Lottie's losing grasp of reality quickly, and she's able to see that Shauna's at least done that and does stop her in the tracks a little bit. I know she gets shot, but sees that actually that Shauna is getting there. She isn't falling apart as much as she thought she was, because at the end of the day, Callie's come back and protected her mother, which I think Lottie kind of appreciates.
I agree with you on that. And I think I think as you said, I think we've not seen the last of Callie's story. I think but what I'm quite intrigued of where they go to next is the idea of is Callie now going to end up the Shauna that Shauna wanted to be before, without being the kind of surrogate Jackie or something like that. But then Callie's already been brought into the weirdness that I think Shauna was trying to not get her involved in, perhaps doing a bit of a bad job of it. But I think that was kind of like a nice kind of like thematic link in terms of bringing kind of like Callie's understanding of Shauna as a kind of like cap to their season arc. Whilst on the other side of the Sadecki household, lovable patron saint Jeff.
Patron saint Jeff, the fact that he went in there and he was willing to take the fall.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But interesting you say with your comment about like the American family's broken or anything. It was that was part of the conversation with Callie about you only would have done this if you hadn't tried to blackmail people. And I think it's the case of no one's buying furniture anymore. It's not the traditional kind of American the broken family America and stuff. Again, and we should apply that to the Sadeckis. I mean, Sadeckis are a very weird, traditional almost American family. We just very untraditional origins. So, but then I think, like everyone's kind of weird in their own way anyway. So everyone's got their own kind of weird, unbalanced story in terms of everything. But yeah. So Jeff tries to take the rap for the thing in a scene with Kevin, and which I think segues nice to talk about Walter, because what happens in that scene? Kevin just starts talking and then just falls flat dead.
Yeah, I had to watch the second time around. I paid close attention to Kevin because I remember him holding his nose, and on the second watch you see him a couple of times. His eyes are closing. He's starting to drip off. But I didn't. Obviously, you don't catch it first time around. And this show, and instantly what came to my mind was you, because I was like, well, that was a flip that I wasn't expecting. You know what I mean? It was like, that was something that I was not expecting whatsoever that would actually happen. And I think just in general, before we talk about that scene as well, is the use of weaponry, the fact that both guns came into play that have been, again, going back to the writing, both guns have been used from previous episodes. You've got potentially, I'm not 100% sure, it was either fentanyl or the other one I can't pronounce, which I do not have phenobarbital. And then you've obviously got the fact that, you know, that Nat dies from that. And you've obviously got Kevin dying from like one or two fentanyl or whatever. So I do like the fact that there's like 3 methods of killing at this point, and then just shooting a dead body 3 times. But then the fact that, you know, it just like, you've got the whole Jeff thing being followed by the police turn up, but you've got Walter, the way he's acting, the way he was like, he just kind of like, oh, I'm a citizen detective. Have you heard about us? And Kevin's going, no idea who you are. And what I find intriguing on the second watch, I made sure I looked at this, was some of the words that were used to then be used by Walter for, what's his face? The person I can never remember, the other copper.
I write him down as porn stash.
Porn stash, yeah, about porn stash. We've got Freddy and porn stash. You know, that's fine. So about porn stash, that they use some of the phrases that Walter recorded. So the fact that you've got Shauna, and there's a couple of other lines that he uses and utilizes. So I think that's quite interesting that that he actually uses that. So it's not just like a method of killing and he just goes, all right, I've got an opportunity to kill a police officer here. He's made absolutely, he knows exactly what he's doing, does Walter. And it is effective, and, you know, it's up there. I mean, Misty and those two on the rampage, you know, you just don't want to get in the way of them, do you really? I mean, totally psychotic.
Bonnie and Clyde 2023.
Yeah, I did think that, or Thelma and Louise or something like that. You know, it's definitely that kind of thing. And I just thought, oh, okay, that was a churn for the books. And then to put it in Jeff's hands, it's just like, you know, if anything, this episode for me, putting that into Jeff's plate and going, and he's just going, can you help me move the body? And Jeff's going, what? And I think there's one moment, and I'm sure we'll come back to it, where it says, Jeffrey, and he says, sorry, did you get called that? My mother calls me that. Does she?
No.
No. It's just totally like, no, I know I'm a bit nervous. I don't know what's going on.
I really liked look how Elijah Wood played goes, hi, I'm Walter, I'm a friend of Misty's, unless you don't know about me, yes. I was like, I just love the phrasing of that. It's like, I mean, already like Misty was referring to him as her boyfriend like last week, like without even like having any conversations about it with him yet, and like already Walter's like, oh, I'm a friend of Misty's.
And I do find it interesting that we haven't necessarily seen the end of him. I mean, I was kind of expecting it to be a one season and done. So the fact that, you know, that he is still around, and the story that he's left with, and just going back to like those scenes, just how full on he is. I mean, the fact that, you know, he goes past Syracuse and just like takes his gun and shoots 3 times, and it gets a bit surprised when he does it. It's like, ooh, you know what I mean? Yeah. To infiltrate the fact that gun has been used, being fired 3 times, he has to then report that to the police. You know, in England it'd be the IPCC, but wherever the equivalent is for the police over there, that he's fired his weapon 3 times into Kevin, so, and implicating him in that. So I just think that the methodology of Walter there and his psychotic thinking is really intriguing.
Do you think it's a bit too neat way of resolving the Adam Martin situation? Because yes, I had that feeling. I was like, oh, okay.
It again goes back to that. It feels rushed. It feels like it's just like all the I's are dotted, all the I's are dotted and T's crossed, basically. My only hope would be that doesn't hold, that you just have that holding over, because if it becomes, and I think I've talked about this before, when I like things that are abstract, that and we've talked about it in regards to the supernatural, if we're being honest. But to have that all like, oh, well, you've got you in a corner and that's it done. I don't feel it's a show that would do that. And if it does, I'd be little bit disappointed because you need that ominous background happening. You need these things happening. Just, maybe the creek start to show next season. That would be my hope. But at the same time, I do appreciate, and a lot of people, obviously I don't look at any reviews till after I've recorded these podcasts, but I've seen a couple of things saying about the fact that they don't like the police officer storyline. So is it that they might not go back to it because of that, or will they have something just holding over Syracuse and just utilize it in a different way and put the Adam Martin thing to bed, but still have like crooked cop?
See, yeah, that's linking to something I was going to ask you that I kind of hinted at before. In terms of the kind of like improvising and having to kind of change things because of external factors, like I think I got like assuming that Juliette Lewis is wanting to leave. I wonder how much they gauge on how things are being written and how things are being written as it's going on. So it's not like a network season of TV where if something's not working, you can physically see as a season progresses, things changing with course correction or diversions happening all the time. So if there's a new character introduced and it's not working within about 6 or 7 episodes after like a hiatus, you'll suddenly see that character suddenly get written out or anything. It's not like that. And I'm just wondering whether about halfway through writing, they decided, or halfway through writing, they thought, crap, we need to get rid of this police storyline. It just doesn't seem to be doing anything interesting half the time. So they kind of just use Walter to wrap things up.
Yeah, and right in a bow potentially. I know you mentioned. I think you mentioned this last week as well, week before. But the tie thing just seems to frustrate me a little bit now. It's not necessarily hasn't really frustrated me since, but it's just like the Adam Martin thing has weighted so much down that it's like you're not giving anyone else really time to breathe. I know the Lottie things can kind of come in, but really, what is Lottie? If I'm being honest. Much as like sort of, I like the idea of Lottie. What she brought to the table, really, there's not a lot. You know what I mean? It's just been a case of she's got this camp, she's left Switzerland, she's trying to rebuild her life. She feels like she's getting there, but she's that fragile that, it's been knocked and especially, this is kind of the problem I had with this episode was just how far down that she's knocked, to the point of like when she was like, getting them all together around the table, and actually she was visibly shaking. I'm like, I'm not sure about this, and wasn't sure. So the Adam Martin storyline just seems to be holding everything up, and it's ironically saying it's like a deck of cards, isn't it? Literally, where it just feels like it's just holding everything up. There's no real connection with Ty whatsoever with last season, apart from the beginning of the season where it was like, all right, you've got the results, and my family unit's breaking down. So that's all we've got with there. We don't know what's happening with Steve.
Yeah.
No, Steve survived, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Because Ty hasn't been with him. Or
has
anyone's looking after him. Yeah. Exactly. He definitely won't be worth putting on the Barbie because he won't have any, he'll be like skin and bones. So, yeah, I don't know. It feels to me that storyline, I think it's looking at the reviews and thinking back to it, I think it might have been a bit of a misstep to lean so heavily on it.
And leading back onto the kind of reaction stuff, I'm thinking because of the positive reaction I think the audience had to Van, I think to Lottie as well. I'm wondering if the inclusion of present day Lottie was a reaction to the praise that people were giving teen Lottie. So they get and as much as Lauren Ambrose is ace, and I think she's great. I wonder how much of that was a reaction to really like Van. What if we said that Van survived as well, and then brought in adult Van to the expense of other stuff, and I'm guessing that kind of rebalanced. I think quite a few reviews were talking about Sammy as a character, like no one liking Sammy, or he's just the world's creepiest kid. I'm wondering how much of that was like, yeah, maybe we should just like tone down on Sammy because no one seems to like him.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, because the Sammy question is good because it's turning into a more of a 2-season review.
Yeah.
But the Sammy thing for me is like that's what made the first season really good. Those moments where it was like, oh God, what's happening with him? You know, it made it feel. I mean, I know there's obviously other Ty that's involved here, and he was obviously petrified of other Ty basically. But it's like doesn't feel to be anything like that in this season. It doesn't feel like there's like something ominous or something like, within each of them. Like, so I know that we've had Ty and Van together and very briefly about other Ty, but that was like only really one episode. It was half an episode, if that, about that. So we've had this Adam Martin thing going on right the way through the season, and I get it. I get why. I get the whole Melanie Linsky and Sophie just being together. And then the baby being born and Callie and all that type of thing. I get it. I totally get it. Why you would do that. It just seems to be at the detriment to everyone else. And that's what I don't get. I don't get. You've got people, and I would joke around about Lottie, but you get people who might be a fan of Lottie, who might be a fan of Nat, who might be a fan of such and such, but you lean heavily on one direction. Some of it is marvelous, great stuff. I'm not denying that, but it doesn't feel like it's balanced right. I don't know. Obviously, hopefully over 5 seasons, it might balance, but it just feels a little bit off kilter.
Yeah, I think if we put it into context, I think we didn't get around. I didn't get around to doing a character special on Natalie, but we did do on Sean and Misty and Thaisa. So I probably haven't got any plans to do any for season 2, but I think in comparison, a Thaisa season 2 character special would be half an hour.
Yeah.
There's not really been much to it, and again, I think it's probably a case of whether they're saving that for a rainy day or anything like that. But a big question that I got written down afterwards is, okay, they seem to kind of wrap things up in season 2, but where does the show, particularly for the 2023 storyline, where on earth does that story go from here? It feels like it's close. I can't. There's no natural progression or anything like that. I think the way season one ended, you got Natalie being kind of kidnapped with people wearing jewelry with the symbol on, which suggests there's something a lot more of a wider mythology over there. And whilst the cult was an interesting thing, and you got a few things that's worth being interested in, there's not been much. Doesn't feel like there's anything else to kind of progress that story forward, which I feel is kind of weird, particularly when, and I completely forgot about this. Until someone mentioned it in a review I was reading before my second watch earlier. Someone goes, "Yeah, so Travis's murder,
yeah,
that Natalie was trying to solve." Yeah, what's up with that? Yeah.
I mean, apart from obviously Lottie being there and seeing the Laura Lee thing, because obviously that's been kind of like just holding over a little bit, but and I suppose there is an answer in that, saying that Lottie was the one responsible, but there's nothing really connecting.
Yeah, because there's still that kind of mystery, which I don't think is supposed to be mystery. I think it's my current theory is that he just committed suicide. He probably did commit suicide because of something, possibly because of the blackmail.
Because obviously there's no Natalie to kind of have the agency for it, is there? No, there's no.
Yeah.
What's the reason for going back in Travis's murder unless something happens with Lottie?
Yeah,
that's the only way that story can progress.
Or it's Misty, or Misty goes to try and quote unquote make amends for killing Natalie by trying to solve the circumstances of Travis's death or something like that. That's the only way I can see that. But that's the only kind of lingering thing I can think of that has any lasting impact on an overarching story. The only other thing that potentially could be is whether there is other people still alive that have kind of potentially bigger threats to them in the present day, which leads me to very briefly chat about Ben, because part of me is wondering
Ben,
because
my new most MVP.
Yeah,
he's been slowly becoming my MVP, and it carries on this week.
Yeah, I think Steve Kruger doing great stuff as Ben, or at least. But yeah, you're completely right. You're completely right when you said that you think that he's got a bigger story purpose to do.
Wait, it's Ben versus Natalie now, isn't it?
Yeah, Ben, like the future. He's like Richard Kimball.
Yeah, it's the whole we are friends, we are one, and we are now enemies kind of thing. Especially given, and I think I mentioned this on episode 7. I think, or I might have mentioned it off air. The I know we joke around saying about Lost. I mean, there's obviously connections and things like that to like, I can't not help that. But the more and more I watch this show now, it's actually having more and more hallmarks to Walking Dead than it has actually to Lost, because the cabin is now gone. It's like the second season, right? Okay, well, in I think whatever the season was, season 3, season 4, where they end up going to a farm in Walking Dead, and then they have to leave that farm because of things that happen, and they have to move on to a new season. It feels like, saying that wrap up is like, it's like, okay, right, we're just going to set that cabin on fire. So that means, and I'm sure I said something like something's going to happen to that cabin. For it to move on.
It can't. One of us predicted, or saying we either made the joke of like.
I'm just going to say, called it. But yeah, so they have to move on. It's coming out of winter anyway, so there'll be that element. But Ben's got his own little hidey hole. Natalie is aware of that hidey hole, so there is that element to it. And now, and there will be at some point. I mean, you said like the most obvious thing is that Ben's. The most likely thing is that Ben's probably set light to that cabin, or it doesn't actually show you on screen. So there is an element of potentially it might not have been, but all indications are that Ben has done that. And I think what I was thinking about with Ben during this episode is he has become the audience surrogate, because you can only see so much when you're watching this show in like sort of what Lottie's doing, what Lottie did with Shauna, and Shauna beating her to a pulp. That you've seen Shauna doing what she does in this episode, and you become desensitized to it. And Ben is the one that keeps bringing us back to actually, oh, hang on a second. If you were to see that in Cold Day of Light, you'd be like mortified, and you'd be kind of absolutely, oh my God. So he has now become that audience surrogate to see what they're doing. And I think, like I said over the past few episodes, I think he's got more story to tell. Right now, his story is actually to check us, make sure we are in the right mode, because, we'll get too involved and too numb to everything we're seeing around us. And he's the one that's given us that reaction.
Yeah, there was some, like, I think an interview where the writers were saying, oh yeah, you're going to be disliking the girls by the end of the season for reasons beyond reasons that we have seen, and I think saying that Ben's going to be saying that Ben's the audience. I'm going to say August surrogate, the audience surrogate. I think makes sense, because like, yeah, I think pretty much we're going through heel turns after heel turns, to use wrestling terminology, with the girls, where they're just starting to, like, not just a case of survival, where they are literally starting to become kind of a cannibalistic hunting pack, like based, or like event, like action PS5 game villains, like they are Resident Evil villains, or they are turning into Resident Evil villains. I think you kind of perhaps need someone to kind of root for, and and like there's nothing so far that's made Ben lose audience sympathy. So I think, I've got a feeling that season 3 is going to be a case that the girls are going to be a lot more harder to like in the 90s.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I did say this last week. I think obviously the cabin's gone now, so you can't be old man in the cabin, but you can be old man in the woods. And you know, there is an opportunity, or potentially, that he doesn't get rescued, and he's still out there. I definitely feel that there's something, and I say with his story, where a lot of people were saying he was a goner, and it did cross my mind. You know, he's a lot of things he went through a lot, but he's kind of gone through a rebirth. So the fact he's gone through that rebirth and now he's become the audience surrogate for things like this, it makes him more important and involved in the story, where he hasn't been that. And like we're saying with likes of Ty and the like, Ben's feels more natural for him not to be in the limelight, because they've kept him. He's having this alternative reality aspect to him, which I suppose over the season he has been one that's actually had a bit of weight to him through the season, I suppose. So he's been all right actually from that, but at the same time he's not been really had much agency actually within the 90s storyline. He's only in one time frame, as we know at the moment, that we've seen anyway. So there is more onus on that, and they flipped that a little bit by having this alternative reality with him. So I think that helped break you up. I mean, obviously the Adam Martin storyline is different, but that's probably helped break it up a little bit. But for him to like be this guy in the woods now, and obviously be within that's going to be interesting, because I don't see him like being killed off, especially not early in the season. I mean, you could say in the next season maybe, but I don't think he's going to be one of those people that will just get killed off quite quickly.
I think he's a lot more important to the narrative than I think everyone was, because everyone was giving him the name Coach Deadmeat.
Yeah.
Thinking, he's going to be the first person eaten. But the show being the show as it is, in the low-key way, spins stuff in a more interesting direction than just being predictable. Unless
Walter's involved.
Yeah, true. And I think one of the few aspects that I think was perfectly fine is what the show's doing with Ben at the moment. I think is a lot more interesting, and he's obviously more important to the later seasons in the show. But the way he's being used is having a lot more interesting. Which, if you compare that to Dark Tie, they don't treat that with the same level that they've been treating Ben's story. I think they're doing that. But I can't take credit to this. Someone else. This was either it was either on Reddit or a reply on the AV Club review. I can't remember which. But someone pointed out that Natalie pretty much, when telling Ben what happened, saying, "You need to go. You don't belong here, or you don't belong in this place." Not the exact wording, but a very similar sentiment, and a lot was spoken by Paul a few episodes ago. So it was what was either his psyche or potentially.
You mean when he was on the phone? When he was on the phone, and he said something like, "This is not your place" or something like that, didn't he?
Yeah, I think not Paul said something to him saying, and that's when he.
You call him not Paul.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. So Paul, not Paul. PNP.
Yeah.
Yes, because he does say. Paul. Yeah, because he does say something when he's on the phone, isn't he? When he's in the cabin, and he says, "This is not your place" or something like that, doesn't he? And I think he said something similar to in this episode, doesn't he? I think Ben. Natalie says it.
Natalie says something similar, and says something similar to that. So, but then potentially, if there is something supernatural or it or whatever, then like the implication could possibly be that whatever is in the cabin or whatever thing was talking to Ben, if it wasn't his psyche saying anything like that, then potentially this supernatural entity or whatever was talking to Ben through this fictional thing, he potentially could be warning Ben that, "Run, these girls are mad."
Yeah. So we've now got like an evil thing and a good thing.
Yeah, like we've got like
two supernatural things.
Yeah, like a man in white and a man in black.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I could get on board with that.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone else has thought about doing that kind of warring other beings.
Maybe the brothers.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
Potentially. Let's not go down that route.
Yes. But I found that quite interesting to perhaps ponder on.
Yeah, I did think, that disassociation thing, because it's difficult with this show, because this show does do that a lot. It does. There's certain things that are connective tissue which you can expect a TV show to do, but there's also this element of like instilling this little bit of idea of a supernatural potentially, totally doubling down on it with Lottie and when she was a young girl, and then having those moments where there's like an alternative reality, and then that is in infusion into what Ben is seeing, and then things being repeated, like Monica's being repeated again, like what you just said there with that, wherever that comment was made. The coincidence aspect of it keeps that energy for supernatural or for something quite ethereal's happening. And I know that even like the word use of it is always kind of thing, and like we said with the death scene with Natalie, that it's hungry, it's that, and it's not necessarily an actual entity as such. It's just that vibe, and we'll go back to what Lottie said about is it does it really matter, or whatever she said. I keep saying does it really matter, but whatever she said, but yeah, they know what they're doing in that, because if you are repeating lines that someone else has said, then someone's going to make that connection, and then that brings about conversation.
Yeah. But overall, I think it does solidify your point in that Ben is perhaps a lot more important to the overall story, as we've seen, and part of me is half serious, half not, expecting an old version of Ben to show up. But
yeah,
if that happens, then that will probably be, and I am convinced it will happen at some point. The girls, the remaining women, heading back to the wilderness themselves.
We have to go back.
Yeah.
It's hard to see them going back now, though, isn't it? But it's hard to see them going back.
True.
So I don't know. I mean, you could have an episode where they don't go back and Ben comes back, and he's back in 2023.
Yeah,
as in like he's been rescued or taken away from the woods.
With a
see that.
Yeah,
with that happening.
With a robot leg. And,
with the robot leg, yeah.
It's aiming to assassinate all the people that wronged him or tried to chase him down. But,
yeah, maybe he's the master of the arts now. He's got his man in white. He can get off that forestry and actually come into the wider world, and he brings it with him.
Yeah,
and maybe that's the balance of the Force.
True, definitely. But yeah, and
Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ben Kenobi. No one's made that link, have they? He's old Ben. That's what he is. He's old Ben.
Of course. Yes, I know him. He's me.
Old Ben Kenobi. I wonder if they mean old Ben Kenobi. And that's Callie saying that. I wonder if they mean old Ben Kenobi.
Because what goes? Oh yeah, old Ben Kenobi. I think his name's Scott or something. He's the weird guy in his mid 50s who sits in his rocking chair next to our house. Like, what? Yeah, because he's got no leg, and then it's like Sean looks out the window and just sees an old Ben, like a grey beard, just on a rocking chair, just staring at the Sadeki house. But talking to Shauna, I think the character we've not really delved too much on that much, aside from the family around. This is like there's interesting kind of developments, particularly in the very low key. She doesn't really get a focal point in the 90s, but aside from the character reacting to Natalie, which both has hints to what might happen next season, as opposed
Well, yeah,
to
I mean, in that 90s, it said she thought it was Jackie that made her feel invisible, but that's what that's what was written on the thing. And that's when she's obviously affected by it, and the fact that the fire started and she recognised that the fire was there because she was too busy writing in a journal saying, I feel invisible still. And yet Natalie has the thing, and as you say, having that conflict between Natalie and Shauna is certainly interesting in the 90s thing. But that's pretty much all we get, the fact that in that Natalie and Shauna kind of scene, because you see Natalie perk up, Shauna perk up when Lottie starts saying about like sort of the next, the one to step up, which in itself, if we just quickly talk about that, if we don't mind, the fact that she said, I can't hear them anymore, and everyone else has learned to hear, which is interesting because, again, the reflection in the new modern Lottie is that Lottie's starting to hear it again. So she's got two separate ends of that spectrum, really, and the fact that she can't hear, worries her to the perspective of actually appointing someone new, because she's basically lost all will at that point. She's allowing Shauna, I think, has more of an effect because of the baby and because of the reliance on her over the time, and she's just gone, it's not working, and she can't hear anything anymore, so she gives up the ghost, and it reflects later on when she starts to hear it again.
Yeah, that's a kind of interesting development anyway. But again, I can't see the logic of her choosing Natalie, if I'm completely honest. But
no. Again,
yeah.
I mean, we know we briefly talked about it earlier, didn't we? So I don't think we need to go back over the thing about them, the quickness of that. But yeah, it still doesn't. It feels a bit left field.
Yeah, I think the only other thing to mention about teenage Shauna was the dissection of Harvey.
Yes.
So again, kind of again, it's on the moments where the show suddenly remembers that it needs to step back and allow the characters to breathe and naturally sink into this rather than just cut through it. So there's the moment where kind of like she's practically shivering and cutting up just before it cuts up, and then kind of blindfold covers her eyes, which I didn't go back. I haven't had a chance to go back, but I'm wondering, in the first episode, when you see the person, you see the masked figure string up the pit girl, slice them up. I think they cover their eyes. I can't remember.
Well, I mean, it did resemble that to me, that she's had that headdress since the stillbirth, and it kind of became a little bit of a almost like a telltale sign that we were in the dream state when she was wearing that headdress. So the fact that it's like that's filtered through to the reality. I mean, I might be completely wrong with that, but it seems to filter through to the reality of it. And again, it goes back to what I was saying last week with the compound and the dissonance that's happening with, the fact that she's covered her eyes. Does that then become a part of the ritual because she's done it once? And it's like, well, I did that once, and I need to do that again because we got what we needed, and it allowed it to happen. And finding the jugular vein, stuff like that, going that way, does that become a ritual for her? And I think you've got to remember as well that Jackie was just, and that was something that actually both times I saw it when they shoved the snow off, I was like, how are they going to do this actually? Because last time it was a bit of a fluke with the wind, and then you've got this time where she shakes off the snow off the table, and it instantly called back to that scene. I was like, how are they going to do this? And it is her first time properly gutting an actual person who's not long been dead, rather than someone that's been dead for 3 months and they're not on the table and cooked ready.
Yeah, it's okay. As you're talking, I've got the pilot running in the background because I'm actually quite curious to see if it was a case that the carver masks covers their eyes up, but then the But all I'm getting at the moment is the teenage cast, like not in the wilderness, and it's freaking me out. But yeah, I'll get back to that in a second. But yeah, I think, but again, it's the kind of building of traditions and kind of norms or routines that start coming up and stuff, and we get hints to more, particularly with the rules of the hunt and the hunting and stuff. Lottie says, "Oh, you know what happens if you don't pick a card to Thaisa?" And there's like, "Oh, do you submit or run?" And those are things that weren't in play during the first time they did it. So we get those kind of hints to that. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting, the kind of rituals that will start developing.
Yeah,
that will start developing, kind of happening in there and stuff. And but yeah, but the idea, it's a very different. Harvey's death is very different to Jackie's. There's a very deliberate contrast to how they deal with that. And I found that it's one of the more interesting aspects of the episode. Whereas like with Jackie, there was mourning, there was grief, there was eulogizing, there was ceremony and everything. Whereas with Harvey's death, it's a case of, yeah, there he is, Shauna, knife, stabby. We've got to eat him and stuff. And so I kind of quite liked that kind of contrast and stuff with the future with the present day. We've kind of touched upon it in general, but there's pretty much a kind of, again, finale kind of revelation or no, it's not revelation. I'm talking about, what's the word I'm thinking about? Basically, kind of like a resolution to some kind of that section of Shauna's character arc, particularly when she's talking about it and the it's not real line.
Yeah.
Because that kind of forms the basis of kind of manipulating Lottie. By saying no, basically to stop them from trying to get him wanting to drink poison. We're saying, okay, yeah, we'll do it like an old-fashioned hunt. And then it's kind of surprised when people seem to be really going for it. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think that's a kind of like nice kind of capsule, or at least a nice kind of cap or milestone in the show to kind of indicate, again, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to again, it feels so much like a kind of finale line. I'm not sure how they're going to go. Are they going to have things happen which make Shauna start questioning whether it was actually real again? I'm not sure. But at the time, I quite like that line as being a kind of encapsulation of her kind of viewpoint of everything, because Shauna's always been like kind of rolling eyes, oh God, get over it, blah 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 type person. I quite it's a very fitting in character line, particularly far removed from the initial kind of trauma and things that she had to do in the past. I just really quite like how that line had weight to it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like it's going to have to reboot stuff, and that's probably the wrong term, but they're going to have to restart certain story. They're going to have to add stuff to things, and or delve into certain parts of the past that have not dealt with before. Is it a case that, I'm not saying this would happen, but is it a case that something did happen over there with whoever the she is, with Javi, and that comes into play in the modern day thing, that becomes a new, not necessarily big bad, because I know Yellow Jackets doesn't really do that, but have something that links in with that has an effect on them, and they have to move forward from that. And I think that's the only way they can really kind of start afresh with that storyline, because you've got Lottie obviously in a mental hospital, you've got the whole Walter and Misty thing on the citizen detective side of things. So as you say, a conclusion seems to have happened. So there's got to be something that's going to kickstart another story element within somebody. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be Shauna, because Shauna could get involved because of X, Y, and Z. It could be someone, a bit left field than that. So, even like a Mari, for example, something could happen. And I think that's for me, that's the only way I can see them restarting again, is having some sort of new threat for the team in the 20s.
Yeah. So, quite so no. I think as we start catching up on like odds and sods that we've not mentioned in the episode.
Yeah.
As I'm going through season one, I've just paused on the shot of Misty at the kind of beach party or forest party that they're at. So like Natalie's tripping on mushrooms and she sees just like Misty standing there, but then she vanishes. And the writer says, "Oh, that's an important thing to pick onto later." And that thing gets flashed just as Natalie dies.
Right.
Which again could probably suggest that Natalie dying was probably always on the cards.
Mm.
But again, I don't think it perhaps wasn't this early. But yeah, so apparently that kind of vision of Misty is apparently supposed to be Natalie envisioning the person who's going to end her life.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's yeah. Oh yes, I do actually remember it popping up now on the screen. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah,
it's when they're all in the first episode. It's when they're all like go to that party with the red cups, isn't it?
Yeah, it's when Jackie like gives them that pep talk and tells them to compliment each other, and that's where you have that Lottie Natalie scene that I was really saying that's your Jack and Locke kind of episode 5 scene.
Oh, we were so naive back then.
Yes. but I'm still right. I'm pretty sure that was setting up their relationship and everything, but not in the way I thought it was going to be. But so that's that kind of like answering of what that scene meant. Yeah, I think we are pretty much at the end of it. I think it's a very kind of like disorganized conversation that we've had that's been looping around stuff, but this is probably the closest we've ever got to talking about an episode immediately after we've watched it.
Yeah, there is that, but it's also, I think, the actual episode itself. I mean, as I say, I think I needed to talk through it because there is, and people might listen to the beginning of it and think, "Oh, you're absolutely destroying this episode. You don't like it." And I'm not saying it's a bad episode of television. I think you might have put this at the header rather than the beginning, rather than the end. I don't think it's a bad episode of television. There's so much that had gone the way I wasn't anticipating it to go, and loose ends have been tied up so quickly. There's a couple of choices I was like, what's going on there? And it just, and I'm still struggling now to like sort of properly understand what I've really seen. But it just, but there is a wealth of information to pull from it, and we've alluded to like what Ben had seen and how Javi had to be done. We've got the answer to who was on the stick because that was Javi. There's questions that needed to be answered that have been answered. I'm just surprised. I think you said it a couple of times about the finale. I'm just surprised how much is wrapped up. Almost like a fear of not getting a third season. You know what I mean? There's an element of that as well. And I'm just like, I know a lot of modern TV does this. I know most modern TVs have like chapters of, right, let's bookend this. We've done season 1. We've asked these questions. Let's get the majority of them answered. And that's the way modern television is. But it just feels, I don't know. It just feels like there's too many things wrapped up in a bow, and hopefully that'll become untangled. And again, I'll go back to my refreshment of like it feels like The Walking Dead. It just feels like, right, we've spent a season in the cabin. Let's move somewhere else, and let's go and see the next big bad or the next thing that the next challenge that come on.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that's what it feels like to me.
This is going to be an episode I think is going to be interesting on a rewatch when this series ends. When we've got 3 if they go to the 5, I'm hoping they go to the 5. I'll be interested to see how this fits in with the long running plan of the series as well, and also because as you said as well, there's a writer strike going on.
Yeah.
So I can't remember how that was affecting cable TV series in 2007. I don't think the TV landscape's a lot different than it was back then, but network TV, oh boy, that was a very interesting moment to that. But it'll be
like the Strange New Worlds, I think season 3's development of that might be a bit on the back burner. They're with Paramount Plus, so it depends how long it's going to go on for, I think. And, it's in an interesting position, similar to Star Trek and Strange New Worlds, really, because they're not in the middle of production. So that in itself is quite a good thing, because if they're not in production, you're not able to do anything. But at the same time, you're not able to start anything. So there's not anything that they can do, but it's a nice, dot on the I, keep going to the dot and I's, crossing the T's thing. At least they've got a package just sitting there. Whereas if you're in the middle of a show, and I will talk about Lost in general, because this is what happened with Lost in that time. They had truncated seasons of 13 episodes because they were right in the middle of the writer's strike. And then there's been, I think, a bit of retelling in that show where they kind of went, oh, we always wanted it to be 5 seasons. We actually wanted to finish it on the 4th. But because of the writer's strike, we ended up going to 6. It's like, no, you didn't really have that much of a plan. And if you did have a plan, and the reason why you're saying some of the later things didn't stretch out a little bit too much, then that was more to do with the writer's strike and network television at the state as well. Whereas something like Yellowjackets, at least for me, it does feel like you're always going to have an overall 5-season plan of ballpark where you want to be. Majority of the big set pieces, and then you then manipulate stuff as things happen, which I agree with you. It wouldn't surprise me if the Juliette Lewis thing's a bit of a crap.
Curveball, yeah.
She's pulled out a season maybe earlier than what we wanted her to do. Maybe wanted that to be a season 3 death or something. Yeah. But we might end up knowing that in the future, but we'll see. But the writer's strike will have, luckily, as I say, we've had an end point here, so I think it won't be as effective as maybe some shows that are in the middle of production right now.
Yeah. We've had some comments come through already,
yes,
on the WeMade Discord. I will say that I think I did post a story on Instagram, and I did have a response from Alexis who goes, who whenever there's a story, he's often just gave a like, or has always commented not good things about us on the Twitter accounts, on the Instagram accounts. I think Gen X Goddess. Oh, Gen X Goddess, I think it's supposed to be pronounced. I apologise if I've pronounced that wrong. Pretty much saying I'm not okay, lol. Natalie just said I was still processing, and says last night I was like, fuck this show, but I'm still going to watch it though. But I think, I got a feeling, I think with time, I think how the show kind of copes with Natalie and everything. I'm quite interested to see how they go with that. But on the initial kind of reaction is, oh god, I can kind of see how people might just be slightly peeved off with the.
Yeah, I can. I mean, for me personally, if I've got to be careful how I tread here. For me personally, I'm not exactly devastated that she's gone, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think one note's not the right word to describe it, because she isn't. But the story that she's got did have legs with Travis, but it didn't. There was didn't seem to be any major traction with that story. It just didn't, and it's not Juliette Lewis's fault. It doesn't feel like there's any traction with that story. So the only traction we've got, as I say earlier, is Lottie. So the fact that Lottie's there, and we've got the answer to that, and then we've got all of this stuff. I mean, the stuff that we've had in the first season with her dad and stuff like that was just brilliant. The Natalie stuff was fantastic. I can't say that for this season. I can't. So it just doesn't, for me, doesn't have the impact that it was. I mean, at the back end of the season when Juliette Lewis had that gun in her mouth, and we had that big. And I know what you're saying about the least path of resistance. Like, oh my god, who's Nick? Why's Lottie done this? Who is Lottie Matthews? Blah blah blah. But there wasn't any real big in this episode. There wasn't anything like that either. And there wasn't anything like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like, who is this person? You know what I mean? Or like not a big reveal, but kind of just something to make you feel a bit.
Or to expand, because what expand the mythology of, or to so the cult kidnapping Natalie and who the fuck is Lottie Matthews line, that kind of hinted at a potential the universe is slightly bigger than we expect it to be. But, or even went over all ground, almost like a little nod to the Pit Girl, or which I think will be well to the end. I think we've got 10 bodies to get through before that happens. Yeah.
But just that creep, or even like a low shot across the snow, and you get to you see some spikes in the air or something. He just stops. It's like, oh, I'm gonna find out about Pit Girl next season, or something like that. You know what I mean? Just something to develop that. Oh, and I think they wanted the Natalie death to be, oh my God, and I didn't feel that. I just didn't feel that. I just think it's a natural conclusion to a story which is well written. It feels right in what they're saying with the whole Natalie lets someone die and now she's saved somebody, so it's balanced out. But it's like, right, okay.
Next week on the book. So 2-time guest Colin has added some thoughts. From looking online, it seems like I'm the only person that enjoyed it. Nat dying and the cabin burning down were both things I did not see coming and were genuine shocks for me. I thought someone was going to die, but I expected it to either be Callie, Lisa, or possibly Lottie. In the 96 timeline, I think Nat as the leader makes perfect sense. She's the most level-headed and capable at that stage. I did think Frodo's tying up of Adam's loose ends was a bit rushed, but overall I'm still loving the series and looking forward to the 3rd season.
Well, I mean, Lisa, I think I mentioned last week, I thought Lisa was potentially the fallout. So I wasn't that far off. I was close. But again, it makes sense that Natalie kind of took stepped in there.
And some guy called Tony. I don't know if that name's unfamiliar.
Well, it must be someone from an alternative reality, because I thought he was dead, but can't be that Tony Black, surely.
Yeah, can't be. No,
not the book club.
No,
Tony Black, surely, is it? Book club Tony?
Yeah,
because there's no book club.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know.
Yeah. A finale for me that sums up why season 2 has been a come down, especially in the back half. Just doesn't feel like a great deal of this has the necessary power in terms of payoff. Fairly well closes off the main plot lines of the first 2 seasons, which I think is a good call. The premise and character dynamics need freshening up now. I feel sorry for Juliette Lewis, who didn't get half as much quality material as she did in season 1, and the nature of her death was crap, really. Feels like they just needed to find a way to off someone. If there wasn't clearly some future beat to play with Van, she would have made the most sense. I don't know. Just didn't do much for me. Can I have Misty and Walter solving quirky mysteries around America instead?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will ask for that story, that Misty and Walter thing, M&W.
Yeah.
I can see where it's coming from. I don't think I know, obviously, through us talking to Tony in Discord and stuff, that he's lukewarm on the season. I would say that I have I'm on eco mode rather than actually being full power. Personally, I think I'm saving the water and just tempering it a little bit. Just cooling it down to 70 degrees. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's been a bad end of last few episodes. Going back to the death was really crap. I had this question. I had this something else I've spoken about recently. I think on a podcast I recorded this earlier today, and it just felt like, I don't know if it was the editing. It just felt like it didn't feel that to me. And I think the plane thing in theory works, but I'm not quite sure it kind of the way it was edited worked as well as it could have. I think it could have been a little bit better that way. And Van has to have more of working, because they did focus quite a bit on Van in this episode, to be fair, especially young Van. You were saying about that scene with Travis. that she's that stoic kind of character that she's got power, and she's almost becoming like the foot soldier in some ways. And I think, and even like towards the end when the barn's on fire, she's the last one out. She's the one that's getting people out. So she feels like the soldier and the call to arms person, really. So, and obviously with her death looming, then she's got nothing left to lose, really. So there's some interesting storyline to play there for me.
Part of me is wondering whether, and this is full on season 3 prediction time now. I don't want them to. Possibly they won't. Like suddenly she goes into remission, because from the sounds of it looks like it was quite aggressive and was given like a
couple of months. Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with cancer or cancerognosis. So I don't know whether remission can happen at that stage or not, or after treat, or unless she had to be having treatments. I don't know. Anyone listening can fill me in on if I'm talking out my arse. Feel free. But like one or two people saying that, are we suddenly going to have a mysteriously cured cancer because the wilderness that took Natalie gave Van life or something? And will Van be the next quote unquote big bad or antagonistic thing to follow on from kind of Lottie's visions? Because there's a few times where she seemed to have gone from kind of skeptical to having her old kind of following ways reignited in this one, or at least the concepts there. Because a few times she was saying to Thaisa, like, oh no, we need to do this. So possibly could Van end up being the next kind of obstacle that the surviving Yellow Jackets can face? Because if I'm honest, I could see that happening purely because Lauren Ambrose possibly deserves a lot more than she's been getting so far. And I've got a feeling that if you've got Lauren Ambrose, you're going to get her for some really good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm potentially thinking that the way that the story could carry on is having Van kind of take on that mantle of, oh, it's with us, the wilderness is with us or something, or perhaps going into that. And if she's got nothing to lose, perhaps, or at least thinking that, oh, the wilderness is here. Perhaps I can stay alive by, I don't know, gutting Sean or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I don't think I've got anything more to say on that really, and it's because I think purely because there's nothing really to question.
Yeah,
like we said, there's threads hanging, but there's nothing like, as I say, with like a slow pull on Pit Girl or even something on the plane. In relation to the 98 plane coming back when they came back, when we saw that. So there's, it kind of feels a little bit flat. Yeah. And I'm surprised by a season ender feeling that way. So hopefully, we can get excited by season 3 trailers when they eventually arrive, and then obviously build that back up and hopefully get the excitement back. Because at the moment, for me, if and I wouldn't do this because I think Yellow Jackets is actually a decent enough show, but at this point, if the quality had degraded to such a degree that I would have gone, I'm happy with this now, I'm just going to walk away. It hasn't got to that point, so I'm just absolutely make stress out. It hasn't got to that point. It's still top end television, but I can see people dropping out now. I can see that after the back end of season 1 and the amount of the people hearing about things and jumping on board, there's a big input of people coming in, but I can see it dropping off and tailing off to maybe back to season 1 level, personally.
Yeah. Or this has been at any point of people saying, or phasing out. So much like the show that shall not be named, people dropping out in the middle of season 1 or even season 2, or the mainstream audience of the show that should not be named kind of dropping out at that point. But so we are now at the end of this podcast, or the show that, trying not to talk about the show.
That was a bit finite, that.
Yeah. We are at the end of this podcast.
End of this podcast.
No, we're at the end of season 2 coverage. And I mean, like, you just wait for ages for this season to come. It felt like the longest wait ever for season 2, and it's finished. And there was even a gap there was even a 1 week gap in it.
Yeah. Which completely and utterly tipped my plans out the equation, because it then meant that I was working 3 nights in a row last week when I wouldn't have done that the week before.
Yeah.
So, just the way things fall, isn't it, really? But
yes, but
it's fine.
Yeah, if you're still with us, thank you ever so much for following us all the way through to season 2. It is so appreciated that you're still with us and that we haven't bored you to death. And
yeah, I would second that. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. That our stats are good numbers, so I'm happy with what we're hearing. Obviously, Matt, you're in charge of the socials, so we can please feel free to jump on board and to give your thoughts on what you've heard. And I think that is something that we are quite happy to listen to people's reactions and stuff like that, because that obviously gives us thoughts that we weren't looking at and different perspectives which we don't have. So yeah, that would definitely be something that we would be interested in hearing. So I think that's a little bit of a call to action for people if they can.
Yes, and you can then find us on Twitter under Yellow Jackets Pod, the singular, because Yellow Jackets Pod is too long, or on Instagram under No Book Club Pod. So yeah, go and send us a message. Would love to get your views on the episode and everything. So feel free to give us a message on that. So yeah, I don't know when the next time you'll hear from us will be. There's no kind of specials planned. I might perhaps at some point. I'm quite interested in perhaps doing a kind of season 2 rewatch.
Yeah,
perhaps at some point in the future, and then just perhaps having half an hour kind of. Oh, this is how we think is it. So that might be that, but that will probably be months away yet.
Yeah, just you need to get that break away, and so you can kind of let it all settle in, and I'd say do a season 1, season 2 rewatch.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there'll be things in season 1, but you'll probably go, oh, hang on. So that's always good to do. It's always entertaining to do, and I'm sure other people are already doing that. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, so if people want to find us, you can hear the both of us on a podcast called Shipwrecked and Comatose, which is a Red Dwarf podcast, which is a British science fiction sitcom from the 80s, 90s, and 90s, and the 10s and 20s.
Yeah, it's getting to Doctor Who level. It's what it's getting to. It's not bad if you can survive 30 years. So it's not bad at all.
Yes. Anywhere else, Kurt, where can people find you?
Linktree is your best option. So linktr.ee/r Muldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. I need to update it because there's a lot of things that's out of date now. But everywhere you can find me is on there at the moment, including places I don't actually visit anymore. So by all means, jump on there, and I'll have a bit of a refresh in that screen over the next few days.
Yes, and if you want to find me, you can find me on Linktree as well. linktr.ee/Matt Latham, and that has links to all the other sorts of podcasts that I've done, including the Pick a Disc podcast, which is my music podcast, which was part of the crossover with the season 1 playlist episode that I did with Colin all the way back last year. So yeah, follow us on that. And yeah, I can't think of anything else we need to think of. It's now nearly 11:30 on Friday evening.
On Friday night.
Yeah.
Gone are the days when I used to be drinking or playing in my band till this time. I'd be on the last hour of disco before finishing a wedding or something. Nowadays, I'm just podcasting, talking about TV shows. It's great. I'm loving it. Don't have to go anywhere.
Yes.
And I'm sober. And I do need to have maybe a pint tomorrow, I think, maybe.
Yes. But yeah, thank you for joining us for another episode. And remember, we are part of the We Made This Podcast network. Please subscribe to our book club and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts that allows you to review us. If you want to help us out, If you want to help the network out, please consider supporting us on Patreon if you go to patreon.com/WeMadeThis. Yellow Jackets is not all we're discussing, so we'll give you a taste of what you might have missed on the network in the moment. I don't know when you'll see us next time. But until then, be careful in what you pretend to be.
Do you like pop culture and top 10 lists? If you do, then step inside the Den of 10. In the Den, we have countless top 10 lists to captivate and titillate even the weariest soul. We've got lists of films.
And there's that famous thing about the scene where he improvised his way through smashing his hand and cutting his hand open on the glass as he banged his hand on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really say boo to that.
Music.
The rest of the song is like just a swirling crescendo of clever songwriting, amazing singing, great drumming, like beautiful guitar effects.
Video games.
And I think that's exactly what happened with Zelda. It was everything, looking back, is on a much lower resolution to what we see in Breath of the Wild. But as I was playing it, I just felt like my imagination was just going absolutely wild.
TV. You know, this is where a sitcom verges on the cinematic, still in a neat 20 minutes. And the interaction between these vastly different characters is so well realised. And more. Listen to us on all major podcast providers. Find us on Twitter @10of10pod, where you can like, follow, comment, and vote. Or find us on the We Made This Podcast network at wemadethisnetwork.com. We hope to see you soon in the Den of 10.